All right, chat. Let's go ahead and let's get into this video. This video is titled, what is this titled? Conservative trans woman Kelly Cadigan apologizes for being a pick-me. So, without further ado,
play that shit!
Here we go.
Did you see that one of those right-wing trans ladies started feeling regretful of her grifting? A 3-minute Twitter video filmed in a car. Wow, this must be sincere. People are talking about this video. 1/3 views. Okay, sure. I'll take a look. I'll bite. Is Naomi the woman who said abortion is worse than slavery? No.
No.
This is the woman who said
that was
abortion
Kelly.
is worse than
Kelly
slavery.
Cadigan.
Kelly Cadigan. Naomi was the person arguing against that.
You know, growing up, I always wanted to be friends with the people who hated me, just because I wanted to be seen as normal so bad. And I almost feel like I kind of never grew up. And even in my 23-year-old self, I still feel like I'm that 15-year-old that's constantly looking for validation through not just cis, biological people, whatever you want to call it, but just through Republicans.
Okay, what am I doing here? If I release a video on my thoughts on this, I will be bringing a enormous amount of attention to something that might have not otherwise gotten an enormous amount of attention.
Well, you just did a video on it, so you brought a shit ton of attention to it. I'm just busting balls, obviously. I'm just busting balls. I did a video on it too, so whatever.
We need a goal going in. Let's be responsible. Okay, so I'm not going to go over all of it, but a lot of the stuff this bitch has said has been pretty dumb, pretty hateful too. She's also come across as pretty dishonest.
Bedlam Son in the chat says, for fuck's sake, she's 23. She's not even fully mentally developed yet. Can I be honest? I hate so much the not fully developed, like, you know, mental memes or whatever the fuck. The whole, like, you're not fully developed until you're, like, 25 or whatever. Like, maybe that's true, that, like, the brain doesn't fully develop until the age of 25 or whatever the fuck. But, like, it just seems like that's just this, like, most bizarre, like, thing that's used to, like, excuse away people's, like, opinions. Like, she's an adult, all right? Like, the things she said in the past that were super harmful, like, she's an adult, okay? We've established in society that an 18-year-old is an adult. So, like, I get that the mind doesn't fully develop by 23, or 25, rather. This is true. But it just seems like any time the whole, like, the brain isn't fully developed yet argument gets brought up, it just seems to be, like, in the most cringe way. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's the case for the commenter in my chat here, but I just hate hearing that argument every fucking time. It's, like, kind of annoying. But anyway, no offense.
It's honest to me. Like, not sincerely right-wing, but more of just a grifty type of whatever. I haven't looked that much into her. That's just the impression that I've gotten. And she's, you know, she's trans, obviously, so her being right-wing is kind of not a self-interested thing, at least not in a broad political sense. So I've seen some people say, because I saw people tweeting this, I didn't watch the video myself, that it comes across as sincere. Now, I want to be clear, all right? I
commented on this on my video, and I think, like, is there a good chance she's not being sincere here with her comments on this? Is there a chance that this is another grift? Because we saw this in the other video that I covered. She admitted that her whole you know, comments on, like, you know, anti-trans, like, takes and stuff like that, she admitted that it was a grift. She admitted it in one of her Twitter videos that it was 100% a grift. So, like, is it possible that this is just another grift, since, like, her whole grift to the right didn't really work out for her? Now she's going to grift to the left? Yeah, of course. It's definitely possible. But I feel like jumping to that conclusion instantly does a lot more harm than it does help. And, like, potentially, you know, the left could be losing an ally that they could, like, you know, mend a bridge with. If they just ignore that and just kind of brush it off. Well, she said some horrible shit in the past, and she, you know, she might be grifting again, so we don't want to give her a shot. I think that's a bad approach. I would much rather give her the time of day in hopes that she's being genuine than have a missed opportunity there to mend a bridge. if that makes sense.
I have always been, in my opinion, one of the only large people on the left who sincerely believes in the concept of rehabilitation.
Yeah.
At the same time, you can never really know if a person is lying, and
Right.
she's not given me much to trust her on, so I don't know if I'm going to come away from this thinking, oh, maybe she's had a turnaround. I don't really know. So I'm just watching. Like, I'm not coming into this with some, like, definitive...
Tall Gothic Angel in the chat says, I feel like she needs to earn her place in the left. The garbage she said hurt a lot. She needs a redemption arc. Yeah, and anybody who knows me knows I've always been open to redemption arcs. Everybody loves a good redemption arc, right? Yeah, I think that, like, the approach here should be to be open to her change, while at the same time, you know, being a bit cautious about it, right? Like, just don't automatically go all in assuming that she's being genuine here, but, like, don't full on reject her either, you know? Like, I tweeted something about this, like, earlier today, where I said something along the lines of, like, you know, because there was a comment that was left on my video about Kelly Cadigan, and it said something along the lines of, like, you know, personal growth should be, you know, like, encouraged rather than denied, you know, just because of a person's past. And I kind of agree with that. I actually wanted to tweet out that comment, and I did, because I think it's like a positive message that a lot of people should really live by. You know, people change, people grow. These things happen with time. And sometimes it takes something really drastic and, like, fucked up to happen to you for you to have that eye-opening moment where you decide, you know what, this path that I've been down up to this point, probably not the best path, and it might be time for me to reconsider a lot of the things that I believe, and a lot of the things that, you know, I've been doing.
Prescriptive set of things to say. I want to see what she has to say. We'll go. Use this as kind of like an object lesson in the politics of rehabilitation.
In general. And I don't know why. I think it's through me just needing to feel accepted, wanting to feel like I'm cared about by people who don't want to care about me. I don't know why I've always needed that.
Oh, the only context I'm aware of is that I have seen a bunch of tweets of her arguing with right-wing people. I think she said something along the lines of, like...
Yeah, that's when I first noticed that something was going on with her too. If I remember correctly, it started out with her doing a video, or she did a video. She made some comments about trans women celebrating Mother's Day, like if they're like adoptive mothers or whatever, which I think that they should have every right to celebrate Mother's Day. If you're, you know, a trans woman, or, you know, a cis woman, or, you know, whatever term you choose to use, and you're mothering a child, like, yeah, you should be able to celebrate Mother's Day. I think the concept of, like, oh, you can't celebrate Mother's Day because you're a trans woman, I think that's kind of silly. But yeah, she kind of had a disagreement with a bunch of, like, you know, right-leaning people on Twitter about that. And, you know, she got a lot of pushback for her take from the people that she's been pandering to all this time. And I think that was a real eye-opener for, you know what, these people that I've been pandering to, and I've been signal boosting a lot of their rhetoric, they don't really care about me, you know? And to be clear, that's not to say that, like, all right-wing people are, like, anti-trans, right? Like, I know a lot of right-wing people that support trans people. You know, it's one of those things that, like, people slap labels on people and they put them into little buckets of, like, oh, if you're on the right, you must believe this, and if you're on the left, you must believe this. And that's not necessarily the case. There's a little bit more nuance for some people. But having said that, she was, you know, pandering to a lot of far right people who didn't think, like, they don't accept people like her as a person. And I think she's kind of starting to realize that.
Like, you know, hey, I'm trying to reach out to you guys, but can you stop calling me a trans-identified male? I'm a woman. And guys, you're not going to believe what happened after cultivating a right-wing audience.
And I think I'm
I
coming
hate to
out
laugh,
of it
but it's
because
true.
I've just kind
It's
of
genuinely
been
true.
thinking a lot about the people I talk to on Twitter and the things they say to me, like calling me a trans identifying male or a man. And
That's like the new, like, that's like the new far right dog whistle for, like, misgendering trans people, rather than, like, actually, like, misgendering them. they call them like a trans identified male for like you know, male to female transitioners, and the opposite way around. And it's just like, it's like if you're gonna like misgender someone, like obviously I'm not in favor of misgendering. To be crystal clear about what I'm about to say right now, I'm not in favor of like misgendering people. But if you're gonna do it, just fucking do it. Why do you gotta hide behind some like bullshit like, oh, it's a trans identified, you know, male or some like dumb shit like that? Jesus.
I don't know why I want these people to accept me. I don't know why I care.
Gonna have to teach Rylan to play this game. True, NYT. This game is awesome. I don't know if you've ever played this game, but this was one of my favorite games when I was a kid. Zombies Ate My Neighbor is the best. And now would be a perfect time because I believe it's available on the Nintendo Switch, which I'm pretty sure he's been doing most of his gaming on the Switch lately, right? So definitely pick up a copy. It's good stuff.
Care about what they think. And I think I'm starting to care less. And it's funny, when I was a kid and this happened, my friends that were my friends, they didn't want to be friends with me anymore when I started treating them like crap to try to be friends. Sorry, my phone died. But my old friends, they didn't want to be friends with me once they found out I was ditching them to try to get in with the cool crowd.
That's how you
I saw a Blair White short earlier, gatekeeping who is and isn't trans. Oh God, what was her take on it? I'm genuinely curious. What was her take on who is or isn't trans?
you know she's a woman. Right there. I think the phone died. Sorry.
And it feels like if the same thing's happening again. I ditched the left to talk about how I felt on the right, and I think I'm just starting to see the reality that like the people on the right don't actually care about me.
My immediate impression of this is that this is actually pretty sincere sounding.
Yeah,
I mean,
I got the same
obviously I can't know for
impression,
sure,
honestly.
and I'm not an expert on human behavior or anything like that. Normally in my experience, this is like a very general rule. Okay? But
I don't know what her take was, but the title went by Sorry, Not Sorry, You're Not Trans. I did not feel compelled to give the video my engagement. Maybe I'll take a look at that on a future stream. If somebody wants to submit that to the topic submissions in my Discord server, please do so, because I genuinely want to take a look at that.
insincere changes of heart, insincere turns of belief, whatever, when talked about, when expressed, are usually superficial in the sense that they describe changes in belief or opinions and feelings on groups that they're leaving or joining. But more sincere expressions of a change of heart are about like the underlying psychological reasons of why you had that belief to begin with. So I think a good example of this would be like with Hunter Avallone, right? Hunter Avallone, obviously, he was conservative,
Yeah,
then he
true.
became liberal. I talk with him. I don't talk with him much anymore just because, that's life, but I hope he's doing well. But when he would talk about it, it wasn't just like he made this one big, like, bombastic, highly monetizable video where he was like, I'm leaving the right because the left, da-da-da-da-da. Always monetization on the mind for some people, but not with him. And this doesn't come across as that either, Just my opinion.
And the people that did care about me and did want to support me, they don't want to take me back.
Yeah, the opinions of people on like Twitter are super mixed. You have a lot of people who are like, this is just another grift for her. We don't accept her apology and like all this stuff. And then you have other people who are like super like welcoming of like, hey, personal growth. We love to see it. Right. So there's a very mixed crowd. But again, like I feel like, and I think I mentioned this in my own video on this subject. I feel like a lot of people are afraid to like get egg on their face, right? They're afraid to like, in this situation, accept someone who may turn out to be just grifting to the other side. And they don't want to end up like, well, I was wrong and now I look stupid. And like, I don't think people should be afraid of that sort of thing, right? Like obviously there's exceptions to that, but I think when it comes to something like this, like if somebody's like had a change of heart and it's in a positive direction, you know, why not give them the time of day to actually like reflect on that and actually like support them in that. And, you know, at the end of the day, if it turns out that it's bullshit, you know, that looks bad on them. It doesn't look bad on you. You took the time to give someone who looked like they were moving in a positive direction the time of day to actually express their change of heart, and you actually supported them in it. And if it turns out that it was just a big lie, then it's like, well, they look like a piece of shit, not you. So I feel like too many people get like overly like paranoid about being embarrassed if they're wrong. So rather than, you know, having that take or that mindset with this stuff, like, hey, take the risk. I think in the long run, the risk of supporting someone who's had a change of heart, I think that that's more of a positive thing, you know?
I can't even blame you guys because of all the awful things I said. I said so many awful things. All because I just wanted to be accepted. It felt good.
There's one other thing that I want to add too, and it's that this comes across as a dig to her. I don't know how mentally stable she is. This isn't about her being trans, by the way.
I will say this. It does look like she's like going through not only a struggle with her political identity, but also it looks like she's going through some like mental stuff. Like there's some other stuff going on there as well. So I don't, obviously, like I'm not a psychiatrist or a doctor or anything like that. So this is just take this with a grain of salt, but it does genuinely seem like there's a lot more going on there as well. And granted, like, you know, coming to the conclusion that she seems to be coming to, yeah, that could be like a real shock to the system. So it's understandable, but yeah, it does seem like there's some other stuff going on there as well.
I mean, like, just mentally stable. Sometimes people who are not mentally stable will be accused.
Silver House said so she wanted to fit in with the right. Yeah, she was basically parroting a lot of like anti-trans like talking points as a trans woman. And she was kind of like she admitted that she was grifting to the right. And she's now realizing that these people she was pandering to don't accept her for who she is. So now she's having, for lack of a better phrase, kind of a come to Jesus moment, and is kind of rethinking a lot of the positions she's had in the past.
Of being dishonest because their positions and behavior will vary or flip-flop or kind of like oscillate, you know? When people don't recognize like that can be a part of the sincerity. You know what I mean? In my experience, oftentimes when people make like a short, rapid set of statements or express their beliefs or just act in ways that kind of like vary a lot, oftentimes that's just because they're not that stable of a person, more so than because they're doing some kind of like four-dimensional chess hypergrift. Now, I don't know if she's doing that here. I'm just saying, like, you know, stability is a factor when it comes to, you know, the general growth of a person, I think.
It felt really good, like, being seen by a lot of, like, right-wing creators.
What, this is next level self-hate? Yeah. I mean, a lot of people would often refer to her as, discount Blair White. Like, it seemed like she was trying to do the kind of thing that Blair White does. And so I don't know. I like I said, I just think she kind of like sees that the people that she was pandering to don't really accept her for the person that she is and her, you know, identity as a trans woman. And so now she's kind of like, well, fuck, dude. Like, where do I go now? Because I have made errors. I have made significant errors in my judgment up to this point.
I used to watch, and I felt like I was one of them. I felt like I was going to be like Candace Owens and, you know, get my own show on the Daily Wire and be a pick-me and own that title. And it's just all like, for what? Even if I did like get major success, it would all just be so fake and full of hate. And I just don't know how I got here.
Why would you want that? Well, she kind of said at the beginning that she wanted the people who didn't like her to like her, right? That's a pretty normal human behavior. That's a pretty normal thing for a lot of people, especially insecure people, to do, you know? Now, you can take me as a counterexample. Clearly, I don't care because I'm hated by an enormous number of people, and I have clearly given up on the idea that some of these people can be changed in their perspective on me. But if you can imagine a young trans girl or a member of any minority group, you know, you go online and you see a lot of discourse. You see a lot of people of your group acting silly, which is always the case. That's always, doesn't matter which group you're a part of. If you want to look for members of your group acting silly, you can find it. And then you see a lot of people on the opposition who are attacking your group broadly, categorically. And you think, well, I'm not like those other people in my group. Maybe they'll be able to listen to me. Maybe they'll, you know, see reason. Maybe if I show them that not everyone from my group, from the group of trans women, is like that, maybe I can change their mind a little bit. But that kind of behavior, that pick-me behavior, leads to you getting denounced by the left pretty quickly for obvious reasons, because you're trying to appeal and capitulate to people who hate you.
Right.
But if you're maybe not that, you know, politically savvy, or if you're kind of naive or whatever, you might interpret this as the left behind you, the majority of your group of trans women, being hateful towards you for having the bravery to reach out, whereas the right, while misguided, is willing to have an actual honest dialogue. It looks like she might have been corrected of that notion when trying to have an honest dialogue with them about calling her a woman.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm talking about? I don't think what she's explaining here is unreasonable in human psychology. It seems like, I mean, I've seen it happen a lot. And sometimes people fall into that fully, and sometimes not. Somebody said earlier, was it Any, or was it Any who said it? About Blair White? We talked about this earlier in a GC, but IMO, there can never be another Blair White. They don't need a second one and won't accept another one. Yes, I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
There is the Republican dialogue is no longer in a state where they...
I mean that's true. That's very true. I feel like they, for lack of a better term, I feel like they already have, you know, their token trans person that speaks out against, you know, certain trans issues. And so they're like, well, why do we need to accept this Kelly person? We already have someone who signal boosts the shit that we want them to signal boost, right? So yeah, she wanted to kind of like fill like a second position of like a Blair White type, and they're just like, no, we don't need you. We already have someone like that. You're not necessary. You're not wanted.
They're looking for pick-me turncoats to be shields. The GOP does not want trans people in their audience, you know? Trump held up a pride flag in 2016, the LGBT for Trump. He's not going to do that again. They have moved past the pretending to want the reasonable ones from your group stage of consolidation and genocide. So, well, you know, maybe in a way that's going to be a good thing for her, because if it was, I don't know, 5 years earlier, she might have found a right that was more willing to accept her, and she might have not had a wake-up call. I don't really know. Where have we gone from here? I scrolled down from this video that was released yesterday. She's arguing with the offensive... I know this account. I may be a hypocrite, but at least I'm genuine with how I feel in every moment. This is my social media. My transition was about more than my looks. I don't know about you. Arguing with people. Everyone telling me to get therapy needs to understand that I had a therapist for years and got nothing out of it. That's why I stopped going. I got the paperwork I needed for my surgeries and left. I went through an entire gender reassignment surgery without a therapist. I'll be okay.
Yeah, it does seem like maybe there's also like a mental component to this as well. Honestly, especially with like statements like that, like maybe therapy would be beneficial to her, and some people are suggesting that, and like her response is just, oh, I've already done that and I didn't really get anything out of it, so like I'm not doing that anymore. So maybe there is some kind of like mental component to this as well. It doesn't make obviously what she's saying any less insincere, or any less sincere, or insincere, you know, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, there probably is a lot more going on upstairs than just, I realize these people don't accept me, and now I'm kind of like in a fucked state of mind about it.
I have a lot to say today, clearly. I've changed my stance on what age is appropriate to transition.
I do think it makes me a hypocrite. So I made a mistake. As someone who did transition at 15 years old, I do think it.
This is one of the things I talked about before, where like her existence, you know, as a trans woman who spoke out against like minor transitions was a walking, talking like contradiction, because she herself was someone who transitioned as a minor. And it's not like she was a transitioner, a detransitioner rather. She was someone who was very happy with her transition, right? Like she's been very outspoken about the fact that, yes, I am happy with my transition. So a lot of her talking points were the talking points of like a detransitioner that would like appeal to the right. And while she was trying to appeal to the right, she is not a detransitioner. So it never made sense to me that she was having a lot of these talking points, because it's like, well, you were happy with your transition, you know, so why would you speak out so harshly against that sort of thing? It's very weird. Warless in the chat says 15. Yeah, she probably
Makes me a hypocrite.
She probably was doing like puberty blockers, and then later when she was at the medical age of consent, started like HRT. That was a conversation I had in response to like recent things on Twitter. Like a lot of people, they think when you know, they hear you say, oh, you're in favor of like kids transitioning, so you're in favor of them getting like the surgery and like in their view mutilating their genitals, and it's like, no, that's not what we're talking about here. No trans advocate is going to advocate for, you know, bottom surgery for, you know, a minor. Typically what it is they're advocating for the use of puberty blockers with a proper diagnosis of gender dysphoria. And then, you know, if things progress and it still maintains that, like, yes, it does look like this person's still suffering from gender dysphoria, typically they'll progress to HRT when they're at the medical age of consent, which is typically around 16 years old, depending on where you live. Then you're old enough to make your own decisions legally for your own health care. So that's typically what people are referring to when they say that they're in favor of transition in minors, not surgery.
To take the stance that no one should be able to transition until they're 18 years old.
I agree with that.
I will say, when I gave that opinion, I was doing it with the mindset that I was protecting children. That's really what I thought, because I was seeing like many videos of people that transitioned as minors detransitioning when they became
I actually want to highlight a comment by Uber. It's incredibly rare for minors to even get top surgery. Yeah, this is true. I've heard about that as like an exception to the rule. Because basically, like, when you're dealing with like top surgery for like female to male transitioners, oftentimes, like, in the rare instance that one of them gets top surgery, it has to do with like the harm caused by using binders. A lot of female to male transitioners will use binders to kind of like suppress the size of, you know, their breasts. And so you know, that can cause damage to like your rib cage and also like your lungs, long-term damage to that. So depending on your cup size. And so sometimes like they'll get top surgery like that, but that's like a super, super, super rare case.
Adults. And I now realize that my page on Twitter is definitely more right-leaning, and I made it that way. So of course I'm going to see more videos like that.
Guys, I don't know. That comes across as a pretty sincere rebuking of the argument right there. Normally when people are doing a superficial, insincere, I've changed my mind, they don't deliver a convincing counterargument to their previously held position. That's a pretty convincing one.
And I've done some research and I want to share it with you. So some of the right-wing people on Twitter were saying that, you know, over 98% of kids who had gender dysphoria.
Oh, she's gonna, we've talked about this before, guys.
End up growing out of it once they go through puberty. And when I Googled that, I found this document that did say that. I believe it says 94%. But here's the thing. This is from Texas, the government of Texas. So I can't help but feel like this is a little biased. Because when you go to this study from the National Library of Medicine, it claims...
So she is like 100% completely 180'd on her takes. It's not even just like, I'm kind of rethinking things that I used to believe. It's like, I realized that everything that I was saying before was a lie, and I don't want to say that shit anymore. Because like if you actually look at like the actual statistics of like detransitioners, all right, first of all, let's take a look at the statistics last time I checked of how many people in the, you know, overall population are trans. Less than 2% of the overall population is trans. Okay. And when you're considering like that small percentage, less than 1% of those people are detransitioners, which is insane. And then the other thing that like the far right will often do to inflate their numbers is they'll inflate their numbers by using the numbers of people who go off of HRT, and they'll use that to say, look at how big these numbers of detransitioners are. Meanwhile, not everybody who goes off of HRT is a detransitioner. Sometimes they've reached their level of comfort with their transition, right? They'll reach their level of comfort with their transition to like, what's it called? They'll reach their level of transition where they're like comfortable with it. So they don't feel the need to continue taking HRT. Wait, so it's almost 50-50? No. I think you're like misunderstanding what I said. So less than 2% of the overall population is trans, and less than 1% of that 2% is detransitioners. So take that, like that 2% of the population that's trans, less than 2%, and like that's 100% of those people, and less than 1% of those people are detransitioners. Does that make sense now? Did I clarify that for you, Bonnie? Anyway.
that puberty blockers actually...
The point is, it's like an insanely small percentage of people who detransition. That's the point. So it's a lot less than 50%. A lot less than 50%. We're talking a fucking micro percentage, like a very, very minuscule percentage of people who are detransitioning.
Actually are safe and have great outcomes for transgender youth.
An additional counter-argument is that when you hear stats like 98% of trans children grow out of it by adults, or gender dysphoric children, what they're normally doing is citing studies where they interpret any sign of gender nonconformity as being a diagnosed case of gender dysphoria. So the argument they're making is, oh, all these kids with gender dysphoria, just let them grow up and it'll go away. That's not true. For people who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, that is absolutely not the case, which is why regret rates for trans hormones and therapy and such are so low. What they're basically saying is, oh, look, your 8-year-old boy Timmy picked up a Barbie doll once, but then he grew on to be a man. I guess gender dysphoria is not real, you know? So they're deliberately lying about the criteria.
Right.
Yeah, unorthodox monkey.
Yeah, that's the same way they often lie about people who go off of HRT and kind of like lump them in with actual detransitioners. As I mentioned before, there's plenty of people who go off of HRT, but they're not detransitioners. They've just reached their level of comfort with their transition to where they no longer feel the need to take HRT. I was trying to explain that earlier, but I kind of got lost in the weeds because I was distracted by my game. I think I explained it better that time. Round of applause for me taking a second stab at it and getting it right that time. Holy shit.
But Rob Noor is like an NPC, so there's not much of a point in talking to him.
And even though I still do feel the way I do about puberty blockers, because, you know, at 15 years old, I did make the choice to go on them without going to a bank. And now I don't have the option to have a biological child in the future. But when I Googled it, it does say that they're overwhelmingly safe, usually. Now, when you do Google it, you do see there are some side effects. Like, just because I'm not on the right anymore doesn't mean I'm not going to be open and honest with you guys. Like, these are the possible side effects to taking puberty blockers, especially as a minor. But I will say, as someone who did transition at 15, I was on Lupron for almost like, what, 5, 6, 7 years? I don't even know.
Wow. Man, the young shits really do like to kick the ladder out.
And I never experienced any complications. Truly, the only thing I regret about going on hormone blockers as a minor was not putting my stuff away in a bank. Even though I can look back on that and think, yeah, you know, I was young to be making that choice, and now I have regrets because of that.
That's the funniest thing that's happened as a result of like me hanging out with like Clara and some of her friends more often lately is I'm learning a lot of the like terminology that trans people use. Like the first time I heard young shit, like he just said young shit, I had no idea what that meant. I just thought that meant like a younger person, right? But it's actually it's a trans person who transitions as a minor. They call them young shits. I had no idea what that meant, and like they had to explain it to me. So I'm learning a lot of the slang and terminology that the trans community uses to describe themselves.
I also have to understand that those puberty blockers did save my life as a 15-year-old. And as a 15
What does bank mean? She means sperm bank. If you get on a hormone block, does that if you go on puberty blockers at 15, okay, at 15, I can only speak for myself, but I was definitely capable of siring children at 15, and probably quite a bit younger than that. By 15, you could definitely put stuff in a sperm bank. But if you're on hormone blocker, if you're on puberty blockers for a while, and then you got off of them, I think you could do it again. I think the only thing that permanently keeps you from being fertile is if you're on estrogen for long enough. Or is there a way to be on puberty blockers long enough? I'm not sure. At any rate, I'm pretty sure that doctors are pretty clear when talking to you that this is something you should consider.
year olds, I did make the right choice. Do I wish I went to a bank? Yes. But in terms of my gender, I became who I am and look the way I do right now because of those blockers. And it's so hypocritical of me to tell children that they shouldn't have access to those blockers as well. Not necessarily children, because
This is a reminder to trans women in chat to voice train. Quit being lazy, you stupid piece of shit. All right, continuing.
Oh my god.
still think you should be older. But maybe we should start making it so you have to be like 14, 15 years old before you
Ooh,
can get
still
on
got it.
blockers, because that's when
Nice.
puberty does start. And you should have tons of therapy. See a therapist and a psychiatrist before you go on any medications. My opinion's
Yeah, and that's the way it should be happening, right? Like it should be, if you're a minor, you should be getting like a proper diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Like I feel like a lot of people who are against minor transition think that like, you know, a teenager can just walk into like a doctor's office and say, "Hey, I have gender dysphoria, give me hormones," and it doesn't work that way at all. You have to obtain a proper diagnosis of gender dysphoria by like basically going to therapy for a while. It's usually a period of about 6 months, and through that therapy they can determine like, yeah, this person has gender dysphoria, so you know they should be given access to like gender affirming care, things like puberty blockers and later down the line HRT. So it's not a case of like, yo, give me HRT because I'm trans. It doesn't work that way. Like a lot of people who are against minor transition think it's easy to get your access to HRT as it is to buy Tylenol at the fucking grocery store, and it's just not that easy at all. Like there's a whole process that needs to take place in order to properly diagnose gender dysphoria. And once a proper diagnosis is given, then they proceed forward with actually providing gender affirming care to kids.
changed, and I'm sorry to you guys for being a hypocrite.
Guys, I don't know. These videos come across as rather sincere to me.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not magic. I can't know for sure if
Right.
a person is being disingenuous. Now, how much do I care about her specifically? I don't. I don't know that much about her, apart from the little bits that I've seen online, people complaining about her. So this isn't really about her. But I do think it's important to have a well-developed capacity.
She did apologize for the slave comment. Yeah, I actually covered this in my previous video. She basically apologizes for a lot of the things that she's most known for, that were like really fucked up things that she said. Her stance is on like, you know, minor transition, even though herself, you know, transition as a minor. Obviously, you asked about the slave comment. She did indeed apologize for that, as well as quite a few other things that she did that she no longer agrees with.
For accepting the possibility for people to change in the positive. You understand what I mean? Whether or not you care at all about her, it's about it's about you know, being willful enough, being mindful enough
Emmy says, and black people receive the apology well. It's kind of a mixed bag. Like some people are super supportive of it and other people not so much. I mean, that's typically how things work on the internet, right? It's like 50-50 for the most part. That's kind of what it's looking like. I've talked about this before when it comes to apologies, and I'll kind of signal boost it again. Ultimately, when you give an apology, even if it's like the most sincere apology, the person receiving said apology or the group of people receiving said apology aren't necessarily obligated to accept the apology. The best you can do is, apologize for your mistakes, take accountability for them, and do better moving forward. But there's no guarantee that the people you're apologizing to are going to accept your apology.
To always keep in mind people's ability to grow.
Yes.
I'm starting to think
that is my biggest criticism of a lot of the like woke skull types and like radical like lefties and stuff, is the fact that like so many of them are completely like incapable of even acknowledging that people can change. Like that is such a foreign concept to them, and it doesn't do any good for the left at all. There's so many people that probably agree a lot with left-leaning views, but they don't want to vocalize them because they're like, well, shit, I'm just going to get purity tested, and these people are going to find something, anything that they could take issue with from my past, and they're just going to cancel me. And like, why do I want to be a part of that? So it does more harm to the left to have that kind of like mob mentality mindset of like, if you've ever done anything wrong, then you are unworthy of being a part of our cause. Like it's a really silly way to think. And I genuinely think it does more harm. If somebody shows actual signs of change, and like somebody has indicators that they wish to change, that should be celebrated, not rejected just because they might have done horrible things or said horrible things in their past.
I have an act for getting everyone to hate me.
I'm sold 100% of ex-right-wingers tend to anchor with empiricism as a way of coping with their recent breakdown of their perceived reality. That's actually a good argument. An insistence on empirical study as like a loop around, because you want to justify both to yourself and to other people why you've changed your mind. You don't want to make it seem as though you're just flip-flopping. Like you want to concretely root your... Yeah, it's true. That's true. That's true.
I'm quite good at it.
Forgive but never forget. It's kind of a gray area, right? I see somebody in the chat, Warless, saying forgive but never forget. It's complicated because when you make a statement like forgive but never forget, like I understand the concept behind a statement like that, but at the same time, when you're making a statement like that, it still indicates that to some degree, you're still holding their past against them, right? It's almost like a sort of what's the term? I don't know, but it's basically like you kind of keep that in your back pocket in case like, well, they got out of line, so now I can pull this out and talk about like, hey, remember this horrible thing you did? Like, you did this horrible thing and I'm going to use it against you now because you got out of line a little bit, or maybe I disagreed with something you said. I don't like that viewpoint. That's almost as bad, if not as bad, as just outright canceling someone for their past, right? Like, I understand that like maybe the person who did the wrong thing, should forgive themselves for the mistakes they've made in the past, like come to terms with the things they've done, but not forget about them so they don't resort to making those same mistakes again. But when like somebody who's like an observer or a spectator to the situation is like forgive but not forget, that's almost just as bad as like, well, just cancel them because they did this horrible thing in the past. Never mind the fact that they didn't, they don't do those kind of things anymore. But I'm just going to keep this in my back pocket just in case they get out of line so I can pull this out and be like, well, see, they've always been like that. So like they've never really changed. Like, yeah, I don't exactly conform to that view. Mitz and Measure in the chat says it's like an emotional guillotine. Yeah, it kind of is. It actually kind of is.
Honestly.
So I understand that, like, the person in the chat who may have said forgive but never forget, like, I think they were coming from it from a non-malicious perspective. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that mindset, because that mindset has the ability to cause a lot of harm and result in a lot of pushback as well. Or rather, people being unwilling to vocalize how they actually feel when they're going through these kind of changes and whatnot. Yeah.
I don't even know what to say. I don't want to do the wrong things. I don't want to be embarrassing. I don't want to be hateful.
Like, imagine how confrontational that might sound. Like, you're somebody who's making positive changes in your life, and you're like changing your perspective on things, and you're trying to do right, not just with yourself, but those people around you, and potentially people you may have wronged. And like, you're just like, I acknowledge that the bad things I did will never go away, but I want to at least be somewhat accepted for the fact that I'm trying to better myself. And then imagine like somebody comes up to you and says that like, oh yeah, I forgive you, but I'll never forget. Can you imagine like how that would make you feel? Like, oh shit. So like I said before, it's almost like they're just kind of keeping that in their back pocket. So if you ever fuck up again in the future, they're just like, well, see, they never actually changed. They're still that same person. I would imagine it would make you feel pretty shitty, and it would result in like reclusive type behavior of, oh, maybe these people aren't as accepting of my change as I thought they would be, you know? Yeah.
But I was hateful. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because like genuinely, like I don't know what to do.
She could stand to go see some a therapist, maybe.
Yes.
She probably has the money for it.
Yes.
In the middle of my manic episode. Oh, so she agrees. Nice. Okay, well, you know. It does seem like a decent number of people are being fairly supportive to her, so that's nice. If you give up on the ability for people to change, you give up on the revolution, you know? A majority of people in America may have lukewarm positive beliefs on transgender people, but radically positive beliefs on trans people, racial reparations, communism, whatever. That represents a small minority of the country in every case. If you think people can't change, then you're giving up on everything good, really.
Yeah, that's kind of like where I've been at this, is like, if you're not open to the concept of like people changing, then what's the point in even like trying to educate them on like, oh, you're having a bad take on this particular issue. Here's why it's a bad take. Why even bother having these conversations or signal boosting these ideas if you don't want, you know, to change people's minds or change people's perspectives? At that point, you're just kind of like wasting your time, right? So I think we should be a little bit more open to the fact that, yes, people can change their minds about things. People can change their perspective on things. They can make changes in their life to better themselves as people. Like, these are things that are actually possible. So like when I see this like pushback that a lot of people get on social media when they try to make, you know, positive change in their life or a positive change in perspective, and like people are like, well, nope, like that this is bullshit, or like they're like high key like skeptical. It's like, well, this is why people don't change as often as we'd like to see them change, because there's so much pushback against whether it's genuine or, you know, things like that. It's so counterproductive in so many ways.
Think you could talk to her? I wouldn't be opposed, but I think she should take a couple of days to level out a little bit. I wouldn't want to talk to her while she's feeling, you know, mentally unstable. A lot don't, Alec Gunter. That's true. A lot don't. She likes attention. I'm sure she wouldn't mind. Liking attention isn't necessarily a bad thing, you know. I like attention, obviously.
Okay. And it looks like, as I mentioned in my prior video on this subject, it looks like Nominal Naomi is actually going to have a conversation with her. And considering, like, she really got a big spotlight on her during that Nominal Naomi debate where she made the comments about, you know, slavery and stuff like that. I think if there was ever anyone that is a good person for her to talk to as she goes through this sort of change in her perspective, I think it's Nominal Naomi. I think Nominal Naomi has the ability to handle this conversation with the care and attention that it needs in order to actually have some positive outcomes from it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing whatever comes out of this, and hopefully, you know, whatever comes out of a conversation between Naomi and Kelly. That's going to be interesting to see for sure.